Hello, I'm Donald Macaulay, and welcome to medicsvoices.com, where we talk to the key opinion leaders in health and medicine around the world. Today I'm talking to Parker Magin, who's a professor in the University of Newcastle in Australia. Parker, you've done some fantastic work, but let's bring it back to the very beginning. What started your interest in medicine?
Like much of what I've done in my career, there was no plan. I didn't intend or plan to do medicine when I started university. I started a science degree, but when I was doing that, I was living in a university residential college with a number of people who were doing medicine, and talking to them, it seemed really interesting. So I sought to change courses at the end of the first year of university.
So you were a scientist at heart, but then you moved and you went into general practice.
Yeah. Again, it was not planned. I was I was part of a physician training program in Newcastle, and was finding that pretty restricting the kind of hours I was working, and hospital work wasn't in some ways was sort of not exactly what I wanted to do. And I wanted to spend more time with my wife. I wanted to play cricket, and so I thought it'd be an easier option to do general practice. That was probably really not how it turned out. General practice turned out being really quite quite long hours, etc., but really rewarding.
Well, that was a really exciting time to be in general practice. There were a whole generation of GPs who were really dynamic and enthusiastic and committed.
Yeah, reading the GP type journals. Yeah, there were giants in land in those days. There were truly impressive people who were making a difference in a discipline that I suppose was there right for a difference being made. So yeah, it was an exciting time to be watching from the sidelines there at that stage.
Well, that clearly had an influence on you because after some time in practice, you headed in an academic direction.
Yeah. So I'd been working as a full-time clinician for some years, probably the best part of, well, it would have been about a decade. And then I gradually moved into academic work. Initially, um, with a very part-time position that was mainly teaching. But when you do teaching in an academic department, you hang around with people who are doing research, and you become interested, and you start to tag along and learn, and become committed to that. Yeah.
Well, you've had a fantastic research career. I mean, you've had developed skills in quantitative and qualitative research, which is a combination that we don't often see now. Tell us about your research career.
Uh, I started off doing being very much tagging along with a couple of studies that were being done in the department, which the head of department, Dimity Pond, was leading, um, and that really interests me. So I did a graduate diploma in epidemiology, um, and from there went on to do a PhD. The usual path was to do an extra year after the diploma was finished to get a master's with a research project that last year. But the project I wanted to do was a bit complex, and so rather than doing the year with the master's research, I did a PhD. And that was on the psychological psychiatric associations of skin disease, which was what was really quite interested me clinically at the time.
Well, you've done lots of other things as well. Tell us about some of the other things you've done.
Again, I think I think I'm pretty much a GP still at heart, and so the topics that I got involved in were a wide range, I suppose, especially things like TIA and minor stroke in the community management and ascertainment of minor stroke and TIA. I did quite a bit of work on that, and continued to do quite a bit of work on potentially inappropriate medicines in older patients. Um, medicines in older patients and dementia, dementia prevention. So there's just a wide range of things that I've been involved in. But the past 15 years, a big focus has been on the epidemiology of GP registrars in consultation practice, and that's taken up a big part of my work the past 15 years.
Now, I'm going to ask you about that later, but let's go back a little bit because that academic trajectory is slightly unusual nowadays. Most people nowadays go straight into an academic career, but you did it differently. Do you think that's a good idea?
It's hard to say if it's a good idea. It's sort of what I did because that's just the way the cards fell. I think I very much think that general practice is a little bit different to the subspecialties where the career path is to do some research and often a doctorate as a carry on from the specialty training. And I think certainly my generation, those before, there's a tendency to have been in practice for quite a bit longer before then going into academic practice. And as you say, there is a trend now and we're trying to encourage young GPs to become involved in research early, to do their PhDs early. And certainly there's a need for those people in terms of academic, staffing academic departments, etc. And a great need for clinician researchers in general practice. I think though sometimes it's a little bit difficult for GPs and a bit different because the craft is so hard and so long. Often you see subspecialists who their clinical work is often very narrow and specialised and often in the area they're doing their research. And I think GPs often it just takes longer to feel confident as a practitioner, and it's by definition it's pretty hard to limit your clinical practice to a small area so you can concentrate on that with research as well. So again, I think there are obvious reasons why we're wanting to encourage registrars and early career GPs early into research, but I think may not be quite the best path for some of those people.
Now, there was another pivotal moment in your career because you were part of the Brisbane group, or I think it's called the Oxford group now. Tell us about that.
That was a really influential thing on my career. It was a program based in Oxford and funded by the National Institute of Health Research, and it basically got people, usually fairly early postdoctoral, together from different countries, and it was around research leadership, and there was a certain amount. Well, there was quite a bit on leadership early with people coming and talking to us, research leaders and people who researched leadership. But the big influence, I think, was just getting to know and work with those people. It was a cohort, my cohort, and also some of the others. We've done quite a bit of collaborative work together, and I think that was a great help, finding like-minded people who we found common interests and worked together, and it was really supportive. Yes, I recommend anyone who has a chance to look into doing it.
Well, you had some pretty high-flying peers in that group. Tell us about them and what they've gone on to do.
We had people in my group like Dan Lasserson, who has really been a leader in the interface between community health and hospital health with acute management of things that can be managed outside the hospital, but using some hospital type resources and complementing general practice. Certainly, Chema Valdares has had a distinguished career, and he's now working in Singapore, working large, with a focus on patient-reported outcome measures. Mika Van Driel, who had just completed her PhD in Belgium when I met her in Oxford. She came out to Australia soon after that, and she was a very, very accomplished researcher, and someone who I've now worked with for the past, how many years since that was? It's sort of 15 plus years. So those people have been really quite influential. I've worked with Dan and Chema, and especially Mika, and a few of the other people from those cohorts who have done little bits of work together.
Well, these are some of the real key influential people in the general practice research currently and in the recent past. But I'd like to ask you about your research, because you're doing some really interesting research at a really important time in a very important area, because general practice is changing dramatically. And you've researched a number of different areas that are really, really current. First of all, let's talk about your work on transitions, because transitions are important.
Yeah, this is work that I'm working on, supervising the PhD of a young GP academic from University of New South Wales, Michael Tran. And Michael is very interested in just how the process from going from someone who's been working in hospital practice, the transitions they have to go through to become a competent GP, independent practitioner. And it's a bit unclear just how those things happen. And in the past, those transition periods have been looked at as sort of problematic barriers that have to be overcome. And there's obviously something in that. But Michael's also been quite interested in how they can be opportunities and they can be formative, positive experiences. And so we're looking very much at data we have from a study, an ongoing study of and a longitudinal study within registrars in their 3 training terms, and looking at ways they change and how those changes may group together, etc. So that's a really interesting line of research. We can't tell you too much yet. How we don't know what it's going to find. It's still quite exciting, just trying to descriptively find out what's happening.
Now, one of the other areas that has changed dramatically in general practice in our generation is the move to part-time general practice. And you've studied how that has changed the nature of practice. It's not just women, it's men as well.
It's not just females. There's more male part-time work, and the approaches to part-time work are probably quite different. So the work we've done has been observational, and we haven't quite dissected out all the strands yet. But certainly, part-time practice, probably from what we can see, probably has a little bit less influence on the development of a general practitioner in training than maybe is thought anecdotally. There's certainly differences, but they're possibly not as great as you would imagine. And there are other interesting things where we've done some work where it appears that an influence perhaps is not, and this is in doing qualifications beyond just the basic GP qualifications, doing university qualifications, etc. And it, contrary to what we would have thought, it's not female gender that's really driving it. It's having dependent children. Sorry, I shouldn't say driving because this is observational, but the association on multivariable analysis is with having dependent children. So the things are in flux, and I think some of the anecdotal observations around gender of trainees, etc., are probably not borne out when you look closely. It's more complex than just gender.
And a third area that you're researching that is really current at the moment, that's recruitment and retention in rural practice. And it's not just Australia, it's around the world.
Yeah, it's a really big issue in Australia. It's Australia's a particular case because of the demographics of the population, with it being such a large area, but being a very strongly urban population. Most of the population is concentrated in urban areas compared to a lot of countries. And I suppose similar to Canada, it's a large country and so the rural practice has particular issues. And again, there's been a lot of work on how to attract people to rural practices, and certainly the training program it has workforce as well as educational functions, and there's an over representation of registrars in rural areas. But again, the retention and those registrars form an important part of the actual workforce just by headcount while they're registrars. But the big issue is, can you retain them after training? That's a more complex issue, and it's not. And I don't think. And there's a great deal of research, not just our research. There's a great deal of research there, and I think there's still it's still a bit uncertain just what the overall drivers of that whole process are. That decision as a registrar, where do you go when you get your fellowship? But certainly we've established associations. How causative those associations are is another matter.
Now, as part of all this education, you've been very involved with the Australian College, and you're still very involved. Education as part of the college, that has a lot of challenges. Talk to me about the challenges.
You mean the college having taken over GP vocational training? Yeah. So the context was that there have been a number of changes in GP training over the past 20 years or so, but the most recent one is that 2 years ago the Royal Australian College of General Practice and the Australian College of Rural and Remote Medicine took on the role of training, which had previously been the role of I think 9 or 11 regionally based not-for-profit organisations, educational organisations. So instead of just setting the curriculum, conducting the exams, etc., standards of practice, the college actually took on the role of running training. And two years on, that's been an initially difficult process because it's just a very, very big job to change. But that all seems to be settling down now, and so we have a truly national program now, although with strong regional autonomy is not the word, but regional flavour for the education to suit the particular areas. But it's still a national program.
It's fantastic to hear you talk about education and your research in the future of our GP community, because when you described going into general practice at the beginning, it was really to further your cricket career. So let me ask one final question, and that is, how has your cricket career fared and what's your interest in sport now?
Well, the cricket career was never a big thing. It was just that I enjoyed playing. I was keen playing it, and it wasn't the only thing. There were sort of seeing family and things like that were important. So that's a long time gone now.
Parker, it's just been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for all your research on the future of our discipline. It's been wonderful. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Donald.